The first oil tanker seized by the US off the coast of Venezuela was part of a so-called dark fleet of oil tankers that seek to evade oil sanctions. According to global trade data firm Kepler, this tanker had offloaded its cargo in China sometime after August 13th, which was falsely declared, before returning to the Caribbean. Does this provide any clues as to why Donald Trump is targeting Venezuela, which has deep ties with Beijing and billions in dollars in Chinese investment? This is the Chinese Foreign Ministry reacting to US sanctions on 6 firms, including one from Hong Kong, for involvement in Venezuela's oil sector.
China firmly opposes any illegal unilateral sanction and long-arm jurisdiction that has no basis in international law and has not been mandated by UNGA, and oppose the so-called unilateral sanction.
And if Venezuela is a China and Russia issue, does Washington's tanker seizure and more than 20 strikes on alleged drug smuggling boats have implications for the Indo-Pacific, specifically Taiwan and the East and South China Seas? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. To discuss this and more, I'm joined by Yanping Su, National Zhengzhou University Department of Political Science professor, and Juan Fernando Herrera Ramos, journalist and political analyst for Nikkei Asia, The Diplomat, Taipei Times, and Ketagalan Media. Professor Su, Fernando, very warm welcome to Taiwan Talks today. Exports of Venezuela's large reserves of oil were sanctioned by the first Trump administration to force a transition of power from President Nicolás Maduro's administration. Despite this and widespread allegations of election rigging, Maduro has remained in power, with 80% of its oil export market now held by China. In terms of inward investment, analysts estimate the total Chinese exposure at 60 to 70 billion US dollars across loans, equity and infrastructure, such as rail, road and ports. And Venezuela is the largest single Latin American recipient of Chinese development financing, according to Boston University, with most of the Chinese loans paid for by Venezuelan crude oil exports. Furthermore, according to data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute and CSIS, Venezuela received over 85% of China's weapons sales to the region between 2010 and 2020. However, since the collapse of its economy, China stopped investing in new projects in Venezuela and began attempts to recover its debt. So, Professor Su, let me come to you first. How can we understand what Venezuela means to China?
Well, both countries have very close relations, but it's largely like one-way dependence from Venezuela to China. And we can also observe that beginning from the year of 2020, China began to sort of slow down the implementing or pushing larger projects to Venezuela.
Okay, and so would you say that for China, Venezuela is its main ally? And especially because of that dependence in South America.
Yes, it is true. I mean, historically, right now, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela are the 3 main alliances of China in Latin America.
Right, and so Fernando, if you can help us to understand, characterizing that Venezuela relationship over or compared to Nicaragua, Cuba, Brazil.
They all share kind of like the same ideology, like Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua are left-wing, or some people call them socialist, some people call them communist, but they basically are left-wing governments, and they're also very autocratic. So I think that for China, it's not only a thing of like economic benefits. I would say that it's the opposite, because actually right now they're trying to get their money back, all of that debt. But it's also, an ideological thing, because of their ideology. It's kind of like a speaker in Latin America to try to replicate this kind of autocratic ideas that they have in China and in Russia as well, in Latin America, and to counter the United States hegemony in that continent.
Okay, so anti-US, ideological, whereas a country like Brazil would be economic be economically important for
Yes, that's
for
correct.
China.
And actually, Brazil has during the last 20 years, they have switched from like right-wing, presidents to left-wing presidents. So Brazil is not a country that is like very strongly aligned ideologically. So that's kind of like a very big difference, because like their relationship is more commercial than it is ideological. With Venezuela, it's very ideological.
Okay, and conversely, Professor Su, so what does China or Russia in Venezuela mean for the U.S.?
Well, these three countries, Russia, China, and Venezuela, have pretty close relations with each other.
Let me put it this way, Professor Su, does it, if the U.S. tolerated a Maduro government, does this signal tolerance of China's expansion on the U.S.'s doorstep? Yeah,
to some extent, yes. I mean, so that's why, the U.S., the Trump administration started to adopt a pretty intensive and harsh measures in the region, especially in the coastal area of Venezuela. As we can see, it shows that the U.S. No longer tolerate this kind of situation going on, which is to let Maduro just survive. And so there are more and more intensive measures going on.
Fernando, your view on that in terms of great power competition?
The way that I see it is that right now, because of the trade war and the competition that exists with China, the U.S. has adopted like a more kind of like intolerant stance towards not only Venezuela, it's also kind of like against left-wing governments all over the country. Like, for example, in the Honduran election just now, Donald Trump specifically endorsed a candidate that belongs to the right wing, which is contrary to the party that is now in power, which is left-wing, and the one that established ties with China. The same thing can be said about, Gustavo Petro in Colombia. It's like the first, I believe that is the first president that they have that is left-wing. And Donald Trump has been very aggressive towards him. Actually, some of the boats that were bombed were Colombian boats. So I think that it's part of a larger trend. It's not only specifically towards Venezuela. I think it's more kind of like a way of trying to, combat the spread of socialism, communism, or the Chinese ideals through Latin America.
Okay, very similar to what happened at Panama Canal.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Now, analysts say the U.S. has deployed the biggest military buildup in the Caribbean since the 1960s Cuban crisis, greater than that of the 1989 invasion of Panama. What, if any, are the implications for China, Taiwan, and the Indo-Pacific? Last week, President Trump also released the U.S.'s national security strategy, which reclaims the Western Hemisphere for America and revives the 1823 Monroe Doctrine, which banned European interference from the U.S. sphere of influence. It says the U.S. will deny non-hemispheric competitors the ability to position forces or other threatening capabilities or to own or control strategically vital assets in our hemisphere, saying the U.S. must be preeminent in the Western Hemisphere as a condition of its security and prosperity. Specifies control of vital assets as, quote, control of military installations, ports, and key infrastructure to the purchase of strategic assets broadly defined. Now, while Vladimir Putin reassured Nicolas Maduro in a call of Russia's economic support, and Caracas says Beijing would apply zero tariffs to Venezuela, neither power has agreed to supply military support, despite Maduro's request to these partners. Professor Su, so given the interests of China in Venezuela, are you surprised at this sort of just rhetorical support that we have from Beijing?
I'm not surprised, because right now China cannot do much more. Especially, I think that Caracas probably is expecting something about military aid from China, but I don't think that can happen, because that can make the whole regional dynamics much more complicated, and that's something that China might not want to see. Okay,
so Fernando, does Venezuela actually mean less to China than we thought, or is it just that this crink, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they're less useful to their allies than they make out during actual conflict?
I think that, first of all, I don't think that it's so much of a matter of importance. It's just that I don't think that China will be willing to put itself in direct conflict with the United States by providing military aid. I think that that's a line that, you know, the United States will not take kindly, and it will escalate. It could probably escalate into a military conflict. And I think that if China ever goes to war, I think that it's going to be over Taiwan, not over Venezuela, because like their interests are here. Like they think that they have a claim historically to Taiwan.
So in terms of what we discussed before, we talked about, you know, is this political ideology? Is this actually a test by the US of China's credibility, its ability to, its resolve to support, you know, not allies, but partners, such as Venezuela?
I think that it's not a test. I think that it's a pretty clear statement that it's not so much whether like they are testing whether they are going to support them or not. They don't want them to support it. And they are very, very clear about it. And they are using language that you know, is telling them very clear, like a stay away. And I think that this is kind of like a response to the speech that Xi Jinping gave in the celebration of the, you know, the commemoration of the end of World War II, in which he was talking about, like, you know, the global South, and he was saying that, you know, that these nations, calling themselves even China, a nation in development. I think that it's kind of like a way to like trying to group them together and try to like, you know, make them part of this conversation. And United States doesn't want that to happen at all. They see, as you know, the Monroe Doctrine says, like they see Latin America as their backyard, and they don't want Chinese influence, and they want countries to know that they don't want that influence there. So I think that, as I said before, it's not a test. I think that it's a very strong statement of like a stay away.
So let's move from the Western Hemisphere now, Professor, to Asia. For example, when Trump struck Iran, the nuclear facilities there, analysts said that this was a powerful message to China that Trump is willing to use force. So do you think that by Trump hitting hard and hitting publicly against Venezuela, does it force China to recalculate in the Indo-Pacific?
Latin America, you know, is very far away from China. So basically, I don't think that China will interpret that way. The most reasonable way of interpretation would be that Trump or the U.S. government is willing to take, you know, strong coercive actions toward close Chinese allies in Western Hemisphere, instead of like, you know, they interpret this like, you know, if, you know, something happens in Taiwan Strait, the United States will get involved like immediately.
Okay, Fernando, whether you agree with that, let me just quote you from the national security strategy that the US released. Deterring a conflict over Taiwan, ideally preserving a military overmatch, is a priority. And we will also maintain a long-standing policy on Taiwan, meaning the US does not support any unilateral change to the status quo. So does what Trump does with Venezuela, does that strengthen deterrence against China?
I believe that it does, and in more than one way. I think that for one side, like I mentioned before, I think it's part of a global pattern. And like we could see that, for example, like the Trump administration was asking clarity from Australia and from Japan of what will happen in case of conflict. What will they really do in case, like, you know, this escalated? And we could see that actually Japan responded in a way that probably not even the United States anticipated, which was saying that they will consider that a threat to their survival, and they will use like their self-defense forces to defend Taiwan. So I think that that's kind of like, it's part of the same trend. And I think that diplomatically, it also is a deterrent for like Pacific countries and countries in Central America that are still, you know, holding ties with Taiwan, because basically what it's saying is this very like direct threat towards like, you know, like its interest, and they see Taiwan as part of those interests, and they want countries that are with Taiwan to stay with Taiwan rather than go to China, and they're willing to push it to in ways that will punish them, like economically.
Let's go on to the South China Sea. Also in this security strategy, a related security challenge is a potential for any competitor to control the South China Sea. This could allow a potentially hostile power to impose a toll system over one of the world's most vital lanes of commerce and close it or reopen it at will. So again, China has control over the militarized islands illegally built by China in this sea. So again, is China forced to recalculate?
I think that in a way, like they have to, yes, they have to recalculate, because I think like the stand of the United States right now is like very, very strong. But the thing is that they also have to take into consideration like that this might not be a permanent position from the United States. Trump wants a deal. And if President Donald Trump gets the deal, we don't know if like his position today is going to be the same that he's going to hold tomorrow towards China. It might be friendlier. It might be more open to allow, certain things from happening. So I think that it's not a recalculation that is written in stone. Like they're going to think like, okay, now things are different forever, because they know that there are like economic considerations to be taken into account.
So it keeps them guessing. The
in a way.
Unpredictability of Trump. Professor Su, so, in a related issue, do you believe that Beijing, if it doesn't feel as if it could retaliate or, sort of rebuild that credibility over Venezuela in the sphere of influence of the US, do you think it might try to do something, retaliate in Asia? So I'm thinking of, could there be risk for Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines?
Well, I think in the case of Venezuela, China does not portray itself as a potential hegemon in the region. It kept emphasizing that it tries to be an important economic partner and important foreign aid provider, I think. Yeah, so it tries to be to hold a very low-key stance, not trying to directly challenge the United States. So even though the recent episodes in Venezuela might hurt the credibility of China in Venezuela, because China didn't want to do much more to help Venezuela. I think that's affordable for China. So I don't think that China will try to do anything to retaliate the relationship what happened in East Asia, like for example, to challenge the relationship between the U.S., Japan, and the Philippines.
Yeah. Fernando,
I completely agree. I think that. I don't think that it's in the best interest of China to like stir up a conflict because of something that is happening like in Latin America, because actually like their sphere of influence is in Asia. So I think that they're going to focus on this area, and I also believe that.
But they are stirring up against Japan, right?
I mean, but
that's a test of the U.S.
This was kind of like something that came because like the U.S. was asking for clarity, and like I don't think that China will have done anything beyond like whatever they were already doing unless this statement came out. So it was the statement who caused the reaction. It wasn't that China was proactively trying to like do some retaliation. And I think that what the United States wants is like a more united, like Indo-Pacific, like alliances between the countries to try to deter, like Chinese aggression and stop like, any kind of like bullying, so to speak, like what's happening in the Philippines Sea. And also what recently happened, like in the islands in Japan, near Japan. So I think that I don't see the China like retaliating, and I think that if anything, if there was some kind of retaliation, that will actually make this idea of like the need for an Indo-Pacific to be united against China just get stronger. And I don't think that that's what the Chinese government will want it to happen.
Okay. Also, last week, Beijing released its third China policy paper on Latin America and the Caribbean, promoting what Xinhua calls economic development, solidarity, and peace. Still calling itself a developing country, Beijing begins with this preface: the world is beset by lackluster economic growth, frequent regional conflicts and disturbances, and unilateral bullying, undermining international peace and security. So, Professor Su, previous papers were released in 2008, 2016. What do you make of the timing of this report and the messages that China wants to convey?
Yeah, it seems like a coincidence that almost like every 8 year or 9 year, China will release such a policy paper in Latin America. But the timing is not accidental. For example, in 2008, the paper was released probably mainly for China to expand its position after it enters WTO. In 2016, it was released because it tries to implement or push forward the Belt and Road Initiative. And right now, after another 8 years, the third paper was released. But this time, I think it coincides with the situation in which China's growth is slowing down, and also the relationship between China and the United States is deteriorating, and also there are several wars going on in Gaza and also in Ukraine. So given this different situation, I think China tried to portray itself as a leader of the developing countries. So basically in this paper, we can see a lot of signals there.
Yeah. Okay. And Fernando, if domino theory works for the US, obviously we can see that it's trying to regain its influence in its neighborhood. And if China was to lose South America, Latin America, what impact would that have?
Well, I think that, I wouldn't say if I will characterize it as losing Latin America, because I think that most of the countries have a relationship with both, and I don't think that the United States will force any of those countries to stop their relationship with China. I think that commercial ties will still be maintained. And they're trying to take out the ideology, but they're not gonna get, that much into economical issues.
No, but putting the economy to one side, what we saw in the national security strategy was very specific. No control, no foreign intervention, especially when it's vital assets.
Right.
So if that was to be removed, all China's influence in South America, what would that mean for Beijing?
I think that mostly, from what I think that what they will be interested the most is actually the economic part, because from the diplomatic side, let's say that I don't think that Latin America is that important to China in that way. Most of the countries that we have in Latin America are developing nations that we don't have that much power in the United Nations. And I think that for them, of course, they want to isolate Taiwan, so that's target for them, and that's something that they care a lot about. But except for that part, I don't really think that they have any kind of a strategic objective by influence Latin America other than countering the United States. So at the end, it comes back to the fight between the two biggest economies in the world. And what's happening in Latin America is just kind of a tug of war between them. But I don't see that China has that intention of taking over, the influence that the United States has, and I don't think that they will be able to, even if they wanted to. Just the same way as the United States is not actively intervening in Asia that much, other than offering protection and statements, but it doesn't really they don't confront each other in each other's areas of influence, and I think that that's going to continue.
So, but that's interesting, isn't it? Because many analysts would say that China's interest in Latin America is precisely because of its geography, because it's on America's doorstep, and so when we talk about intelligence, monitoring of the US, this is why it's so significant.
Well, the thing is that probably during the last 2 decades, not every administration in the United States pay a lot of attention to Latin America, especially ironically in the first Trump administration, it really didn't have a very good relationship with countries in Latin America.
Now, isn't it? We can
see
they tried to regain.
Yeah. So what we have observed is that China took the advantage of this kind of power vacuum during the past years to expand its influence. So it seems that China tried to build up, expand its strategic interest in the region. But the thing is that it was conditional on what happened in the relationship between the United States and Latin America. So that means that once the U.S. government right now and the Trump administration try to go back to its backyard, things might change, and I don't think that China will see that that's the end of the world. I think that China is very pragmatic, and it might try to shift its strategy a little bit, not trying to push too hard in the region, but and also it all depends on how Trump administration would do.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap up there. Thank you so much, Su Yanbing and Fernando Ramos.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.